Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Let me ask you something that might sting a little. Have you noticed how quiet the dating scene feels lately? It's not your imagination. More and more men are walking away. Not because they can't get women, but because they've realized peace is more valuable than proving their worth. The air is different in 2025. The laughter, the flirtation, the excitement, it's fading. And underneath that silence, there's something raw and unsettling. Women are angry. Not just irritated, but deeply mad. Because the system they once controlled through attention, validation, and options is breaking down. Before we dive into why this shift is happening, take a second to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the bell icon. It helps more men find clarity, and it supports honest conversations that the world desperately needs right now. Now, let's talk about what no one wants to admit. For decades, society told men they were the problem, that if a relationship failed, it was their fault, that they needed to be more sensitive, more giving, more emotionally available. And men tried. They really did. They went to therapy, read self-help books, learned about attachment styles, and opened their hearts in ways no generation of men ever had before. But when they finally did, something tragic happened. Instead of appreciation, they got rejection, manipulation, or worse, indifference. Women got used to being chased, validated, and chosen. But in 2025, something flipped. The men stopped chasing. They stopped proving. They stopped apologizing for their masculinity. And that's when the outrage began. You can see it online, the endless posts, the bitterness, the videos filled with anger about men who won't commit, men who ghost, men who are emotionally unavailable. But what if these men aren't unavailable? What if they're simply done being drained? You can sense it, the quiet confidence replacing desperation. Men aren't trying to fix broken systems anymore. They're building new ones. They're investing in fitness, business, peace, and self-respect. And when women realize that the validation they once controlled no longer works, it triggers something primal, fear of losing power. And that fear is what's fueling the madness we're seeing today. Let's be brutally honest for a moment. Men didn't just wake up one day and decide to leave. They were pushed out piece by piece through 1,000 quiet humiliations. Every time they were told to man up when they were hurting. Every time they gave everything and got blamed anyway. Every time their effort was met with boredom or worse, entitlement. You see, it's not that men stopped loving women. It's that men got tired of loving in a world that doesn't value love unless it benefits someone else. The truth is, women aren't mad because men are disappearing. They're mad because for the first time in modern history, men are choosing themselves. Think about that. When a man says, "I'd rather be alone than disrespected," the world mocks him. When he says, "I don't need to date to feel whole," they call him bitter. But that's projection, because deep down, that independence terrifies people who depended on male validation to feel powerful. You can feel the tension everywhere. On social media, in workplaces, in conversations between friends. Men are quieter, more observant, less reactive. They're not arguing online anymore. They're simply walking away. And that silence is deafening, because silence means control. It means men are finally learning emotional discipline, something that can't be manipulated or guilt-tripped. But let's make this clear. This isn't about hating women. It's about boundaries. It's about men realizing that love without respect is just emotional labor disguised as connection. That's why the dating market feels colder now, because genuine men aren't playing the validation game anymore. They're not competing for attention that's been cheapened by constant exposure. What's fascinating and terrifying to many is that women can feel this withdrawal energetically. They sense the lack of male attention like oxygen being pulled from the room. It disrupts the balance they've grown used to. When a man no longer needs a woman's approval to feel masculine, her control over him dissolves. And when that control fades, so does the illusion of superiority. This collective male awakening isn't a movement, it's an emotional evolution. Men are remembering that peace, freedom, and purpose are worth more than approval. And once a man learns that truth, he never goes back. Here's the uncomfortable truth no one's ready to say out loud. Many women are not mad because they can't find good men. They're mad because good men have stopped trying to find them. The endless line of hopeful DMs, the men waiting patiently for attention, the quiet ones willing to prove their worth, they're gone. The supply of unconditional male effort has run dry. And the irony is, women created this outcome by teaching men that effort is never enough. Modern dating became a stage, not a connection. It became about performance, about who can appear more desirable, who can play the game better. And men finally realized the game was rigged, that the more they gave, the less they were respected, that the more emotionally open they became, the more disposable they were treated. So they stopped performing. And when the performance ended, the applause stopped too. Suddenly, women were left staring at the stage, empty, quiet, with no one chasing them anymore. That's why you see so much anger online now. The narrative flipped. The power dynamic shifted. And when power changes hands, the side that loses control always screams the loudest. Because control, for many, was never about love. It was about validation, security, and ego. But the men leaving the dating scene aren't angry anymore. They're calm. That's what's truly unsettling, the calmness. Because anger still means attachment, still means reaction. But detachment, that's liberation. When a man becomes indifferent, he's unreachable. And women can feel that difference instantly. This is why you're seeing so much shaming rhetoric. Real men commit. Men are fragile. Men can't handle strong women. These are not reflections of truth. They're attempts to pull men back into the system of guilt and obligation. But the spell is broken. Men are no longer reacting to emotional manipulation. They're analyzing it. They're stepping outside of the matrix of approval and choosing solitude with dignity over chaos disguised as love. And here's what's most powerful. That decision doesn't just change dating, it changes culture. It redefines masculinity, respect, and value. Because when men remove themselves from a broken equation, the entire formula collapses. And that collapse is exactly what we're witnessing in 2025. Let's peel back another layer of this. The men who are leaving aren't just walking away from women. They're walking away from society's expectations of what a man should be. For decades, the message was clear. Be strong but vulnerable. Chase but don't smother. Provide but never complain. And somehow, despite bending over backward to meet impossible standards, men were still told they were failing. That constant failure, it wears a man down. Until one day, he decides he won't play the game anymore. This is why 2025 feels like a tipping point. Men aren't quitting dating because they hate women. They're quitting because they've finally measured the cost of emotional labor against the reward and found it wanting. They've realized that energy given without respect is wasted, affection given without reciprocity is theft, and loyalty given without gratitude is exploitation. And no one wants to feel like a commodity, even in love. Here's the psychological weight of it. When men stop chasing, it disrupts the subconscious dynamics women rely on. Because society has conditioned women to expect effort, to thrive on validation, to measure desirability by the willingness of men to sacrifice. When that effort disappears, the emotional equilibrium shatters. Anxiety, anger, confusion. These are the natural responses to a system suddenly unbalanced. And the more men withdraw, the more intense the reactions become. But withdrawal isn't passive. It's a powerful, intentional act of self-preservation. Every man who steps back is reclaiming time, mental space, and dignity. Every man who refuses to chase is sending a message. My worth is not defined by your attention. That message hits harder than any argument, any debate, any social media post ever could. And here's what many fail to see. This shift isn't temporary, it's generational. Once men understand the value of detachment over desperation, of boundaries over approval, they don't return to old patterns. They rebuild their lives around what fulfills them emotionally, spiritually, and mentally, not what pleases others. So the anger you see online, the frustration, the chaos, it's not the end of the story. It's the sound of an old system dying. And in the silence that follows, men are finally free. Free to pursue respect, freedom, and inner peace without the chains of societal expectation dragging them down. Here's something most people won't tell you. When men leave the dating scene, it exposes uncomfortable truths about modern relationships. Women are mad, yes, but that anger is just the surface. Underneath it lies fear. Fear of being alone, fear of losing control, fear of realizing that love cannot be demanded or bought with attention alone. Men walking away shatters illusions because for so long the illusion was that a man's presence could be guaranteed, no matter how he was treated. This is why so many relationships today feel fragile. Women expect men to perform constant emotional gymnastics, to read minds, to offer support while remaining unshaken, while men are expected to sacrifice their own needs. But sacrifice without reciprocity doesn't create connection. It creates resentment. And once a man recognizes that resentment is stronger than any connection, he chooses peace over chaos, silence over arguments, freedom over frustration. You might see this as men being cold or detached, but in reality, they're practicing a form of emotional intelligence that's rare in our culture. They understand that energy is finite. They understand that emotional resources spent on ungrateful recipients are stolen from their own potential. They understand that boundaries are not cruelty, they're survival. And when a man embodies this principle, women feel the shift immediately. The collective withdrawal of men also flips the script on power dynamics. For years, male attention was currency. But when men stop spending it indiscriminately, suddenly women can no longer rely on validation to feel desirable or in control. That's when panic sets in. Anger escalates, and social narratives are weaponized to shame men back into old patterns. Real men commit, they say. Men are abandoning women. But the truth is, these men never abandoned women. They abandoned a system that devalues them. And this isn't temporary. The men leaving aren't wandering aimlessly. They're investing in themselves. They're pursuing mastery over their emotions, their finances, their health, their purpose. They're building lives that don't need validation to feel whole. And once a man reaches that state, no social pressure, manipulation, or outrage can pull him back into dependency. In 2025, the dating landscape is not shrinking because men are failing. It's shifting because men are evolving. And evolution, by its nature, is uncomfortable for those left behind. Now let's face the final, undeniable truth. This shift isn't a phase, it's a reckoning. Men leaving the dating scene are not running away. They are claiming their lives back. And with every man who steps away from emotional exploitation, the very fabric of modern dating begins to unravel. Women's anger, confusion, and frustration are simply signals that the old rules no longer apply. The script has been rewritten, whether anyone is ready to admit it or not. This is why you see such intense reactions online. The rage, the bitterness, the endless debates about commitment and masculinity. It's a sign of fear. Fear of losing a supply of effort, of attention, of validation that used to be guaranteed. For centuries, men were taught that being desirable meant performing, sacrificing, appeasing, and chasing. But now, the men who mastered themselves are saying, "I will not be defined by your approval." And that declaration shakes the very core of what many women believed they controlled. Here's the paradox. Women who rage most are often those who secretly desire the men who refuse to be controlled. They crave attention, affection, and loyalty. Yet when it is offered freely, without manipulation, it loses its power. Men leaving the scene aren't rejecting women. They're rejecting games, manipulation, and chaos masquerading as love. They're rejecting the illusion that worth is measured by constant pursuit. And when they do, they become untouchable in ways society struggles to comprehend. The consequence of this shift is massive. Men are rediscovering freedom. They are rediscovering peace. They are choosing self-respect over validation. And in this choice, they are rewriting what masculinity looks like. No longer reactive, desperate, or performative, but calm, intentional, and grounded. And for women, this is the ultimate disruption. No amount of anger, frustration, or online commentary can pull these men back into old patterns. The men leaving have discovered that life is richer when emotional labor is respected, when boundaries are honored, and when self-worth is independent of external approval. So if you're watching this, understand what's happening. The dating world in 2025 is not collapsing. It is evolving. Men are evolving. Women are responding. And the men who choose peace over chaos are winning in ways that will shape relationships for generations. The silence, the calm, the withdrawal. It's not emptiness, it's power, it's clarity, and it's unstoppable. This is the truth few will tell you. The age of chasing is over. Men are learning to walk away, and in walking away, they finally find themselves.